Um, when you start studying this and looking at different commentaries and whatnot, uh, some things that stick out that you've got to think about, um, and we'll get into that a little bit. But let's notice in John 11, verse 54, 55, Jesus has been sort of in seclusion since the raising of Lazarus from the dead. He has gone to a place called Ephraim that is thought to be approximately 15 miles northeast of Jerusalem. He's there with his disciples. Um, he apparently continues north to Galilee, which will take him through Samaria again. And then he will come back to Jerusalem with the crowd, or perhaps just him and his disciples, uh, to the Passover. Notice that in this passage, in verses 45 through 53, the decision has already been made that Jesus must die. Um, when you're looking at the gospel stories, the synoptic gospels, the crisis that throws Jesus into conflict with the religious leaders or the Sanhedrin is the fact that he cleansed the temple. In John, the crisis is that he raised Lazarus from the dead. Um, with that, the Sadducees' point of view is challenged tremendously. Here he has raised a guy from the dead that's been 4 days dead, who is graveyard dead, who is maggot dead. And they do not believe in a resurrection from the dead of any type. So they're thrown into crisis. Um, if you take it from the synoptic point of view, and we're skipping way ahead of where we're supposed to be, the cleansing of the temple interfered with their money. Messed with their theology, messed with their money. So, perfect reason for him to die. The anointing at Bethany is sandwiched between the council's decision that Jesus must die and the treachery of Judas, or Judas's agreement to report the location of Jesus. And other folks will deal with those two aspects of the story. When you consult the commentators about this story, you'll run into two questions. Are Luke 7, Matthew 26, and Matthew 14, and John 12 one story, two stories, or three stories? And you will find all of those ideas presented. Our outline presents Matthew 26, Mark 14, and John 12 as the same event. And they identify enough similarities in the stories to conclude that they're the same. And then another discussion, which I can't even begin to even summarize is the time. John presents this as either on the Friday or Saturday, which would already be the first day of the week, the way the Jews arrange time, before the Passover, which would be so if you count it as Saturday evening, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, um, Thursday, you will get 6 days by the time you reach Thursday. If you count it from Mark and Matthew's point of view, it may only be 2 days. So those discussions come up. Now, enough of the trivia. Let's talk about the story. John writes that 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. If you're looking at Matthew and Mark, there's another person that's mentioned who is called Simon the leper. Simon the leper. We actually do not know the connection of Simon the leper to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Is he their father? Is he Martha's husband? Is he someone that Jesus healed? Or has he already passed from the scene? And this house once belonged to Simon the leper, but now belongs to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. We really don't know the connection there. It seems that there was some family connection or some connection. Notice again that these people are close friends of Jesus. They gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard and anointed Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Mark and Matthew will tell you that the woman anointed his head. The perfume that she anointed Jesus with, we'll see later on, was quite costly. It was at least a year's wages. It came from India. So Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were close friends. Jesus apparently spent time with his family. We see them in Luke 10. We see John 11. In Luke 10, you remember the story that Jesus and his disciples stopped by the house at Bethany. Martha is all upset because Mary is sitting there and she's cooking supper. And at first, when you read the story, you've got to feel a little bit like, I think Jesus just insulted the host. He tells her that only a few things are needful, and Mary has chosen the better thing. Um, so, and then, of course, in John 11 is the story of him raising Lazarus from the dead. So Jesus has stopped at Bethany on his way to Jerusalem. On his final journey to Jerusalem. On the journey that he's been telling his disciples, we're going to Jerusalem. The leaders of the people, the Gentiles as well, are going to kill me. I'm going to be buried, and I'm going to rise again on the third day. He has told them up to this point at least 3 times that this is going to happen. He's told them this 3 times, and also the Sanhedrin has made it known, if you know where Jesus is at, tell us. So for some reason, the disciples seem clueless to this. They seem clueless. But Jesus has told them.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Just a thought about that, but somebody being clueless. Me, I know a lot of women struggle with how they're depicted in the Bible. But I think this is another great example of how he glorified a woman in the sense that she got it.
Yes.
Nobody else didn't get it, but she got it.
Yes. And thank you. That is where I was going to go with it. I was going to ask the question, did Mary actually understand this? And I think she did. I think she got it where the others did not. The question might be raised again. Did she go and buy this vial of perfume just for this purpose? Or was this a family heirloom, which would still be a precious gift that was passed from mother to daughter? My New Revised Standard Version says she bought it. I don't think any of the other versions phrase it quite like that. They say she kept it for this purpose. So we have here Mary. She loves Jesus. She's grateful to Jesus. She's grateful to Jesus that he raised her brother from the dead. Mark adds an interesting point to this story. She breaks the jar or the whatever, however you describe that thing that it's contained. Some versions of the Bible call it an alabaster box. It's a vial made of like gypsum or limestone and it's be quite decorative, I think, from the description. But there was a custom that, when you broke the vial, you had to use all of the ointment at once. It's 12 ounces as described in John 12. It's 12 ounces. That's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. So she breaks it. Barclay, in his commentary, says that there was a custom of when the body of the dead were anointed with a perfume, that the person that did the anointing, after they anointed the body, put the broken glass or the broken shreds of the vial with the body. So, we have a depiction of love, devotion, humility. She lets her hair down. She wipes his feet with her hair. She gives her all to Jesus. She gives her all to Jesus. Then we have the criticism. Mark says some there criticized her. Matthew says the disciples. John names a specific disciple from which it started, Judas Iscariot. And the criticism was, why this waste? This could have been sold for 300 denarii and to proceed given to the poor. Judas, at this point, is identified as the keeper of the common treasury. And he is also identified as a thief. At the point that this happened, none of the disciples would have known this. None of the disciples would have known this.
It seems like to me, this is like a Paul Harvey thing, that when you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, you sort of hear and you can understand, why they would say that. But then you read John, it's like the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And you can, we'd be more upset because of that viewpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they had no clue about this either. And, somebody else is going to deal with Judas. So that's going to be interesting study. But notice Jesus' defense of Mary or the woman. He says, why are you troubling her? Do you suppose that as the criticism began, that she began to think that she had made a huge mistake, that maybe even Jesus himself didn't approve of what she had done. But he comes to her defense and he says, "Why are you troubling her?" He says, "She has performed a good service for me. She has prepared my body for burial." And let's step back and see a little bit about the criticism. The criticism was, why this waste? This should have been sold for 300 denarii, about a year's wages, and given to the poor. It was considered a great good work among the Jews to give to the poor. And especially at the feast times. So there is part of where the criticism lies. But there was another good work that was even considered greater than giving to the poor. And that was anointing the body of the dead for burial. And so when you put it in that light, and Jesus' words, then you see that he's saying, really, she got it. She understood it, where you guys blew it.
Sort of supports that verse about where your treasure is, your heart will be also.
Yeah. Yeah. Good connection. A greater good work. Some literature that we've kind of reviewed here on Wednesday night was Tobit 1, 16 through 18. Tobit is one of the books of the Apocrypha. Jim probably has it there. And Tobit was considered a good man because he took care of the burial of his Jewish brethren who were killed by the Assyrians. And so we've talked about how that after the body was washed and the ointment or perfume was put on it, that it was crushed and placed with the body. And then Jesus makes another statement in Mark and Luke. What does he say about this event? In Mark and Matthew. I think I said Mark and Luke. What does he say?
This is about her where you said she will be remembered forever.
Yes. She will be remembered forever. Wherever this gospel story goes, this story will go. If we place this before the Mount Olivet discourse, which in Matthew and Mark occurs before the anointing, this is the first reference that the gospel will go worldwide. And part of that gospel story will be This woman's act of gratitude, devotion, love, understanding that Jesus was going to die. The story will go worldwide. Jesus says also in his defense of Mary, you always have the poor with you, and you can help them when you want. But you do not always have me. Jesus wasn't downplaying the business of taking care of people's needs. He's just saying that the opportunity to do good was there now. Mary, the woman, took it. She did good. She did what she could, is the way one version puts it. She did what she could. She did what she could. Kind of the same words apply to the widow's mite. A story that's found in Luke. Notice the contrast. You have the council. Jesus deserves to die. Jesus not only deserves to die, he will die. He will die. They've already reached that conclusion. The disciples have heard at least 3 times. Matthew 16:21, Matthew 17:22 through 23, and Matthew 20:17 through 19. 3 times directly, he has said, this is going to happen. They weren't hearing it. Mary caught it. Judas. What happened? And again, somebody else is going to deal with Judas. The story of Mary's anointing, of the woman's anointing of Jesus, is sandwiched between the council's decision, the plot to take him secretly, and Judas' decision to betray him. So it sets up a contrast of great love and devotion compared to treachery and deceit, if you will. Notice how that the story ends in John 11. In John 12. When the great crowd of the Jews learned that he was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priest planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and were believing in Jesus. So here you have Lazarus, who is very much alive, who has been dead for 4 days. Martha said in John 11, don't move that rock. By now, he is stinking. He's seriously dead. It wasn't like the other 2 resurrections that we have recorded in the Bible where Jesus was involved. The first one, Jairus' daughter, the girl had only been dead a few minutes to an hour. Right? The widow of Nain's son, maybe a day. Lazarus, 4 days. Decomposition had really set in. There was in Jewish mind set that the spirit of the person hovered around for 3 days. But on the 4th day, when really decomposition had set in, no hope. He's dead. And maybe that's the idea that's being expressed in the Lazarus story. So look at at Luke 16, verse 30 and 31. This is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. What's the words of Jesus there in Luke 16, 30 and 31? Even if somebody rises from the dead. So here you have an example of someone that has been risen from the dead. Their answer is destroy him as well. Destroy the evidence. And of course, that passage from Luke 16, 30 through 31 will extend beyond Lazarus to Jesus himself. Some will believe, some will not. So, Lazarus' life is in the danger also at this point. Simple story, expressing great devotion and love and sacrifice toward Jesus. It's also a simple story expressing great insight to what Mary perceived. And, in the stories, Luke 10, 38 through 42, Mary listens to Jesus. Martha talks, Martha serves, and Martha is needed. Marthas of this world are needed. Marys are needed. So, any questions, comments, observations, things I missed?
I was just going to say, like Mary got it and the disciples didn't. And I think about the fact that they were traveling with him for 3 years. So in the beginning, they probably were listening to Jesus, but after so long of traveling and stuff, maybe they just got to where it became routine for them. And maybe they kind of like listened, but not really listened because they always thought, he would be with them. Whereas Mary didn't travel in that same circle. So when she heard of him, when she was listening to him, she heard him fresh with fresh ears.
Okay. That's a possibility. That sometimes familiarity breeds contempt.
So you said that, talking about it's been sandwiched in between different events, and made me think too about how she took advantage of the moment, and how many times God has maybe spoke to us and we did not take advantage of the moment.
Good point.
We missed a huge opportunity.
Looking
for him and seeking him, and she got it, and she took advantage of the moment.
Yes. Bubba made the point that, sometimes God prompts us, or there are things that we see that we feel a need to help, we need, or we can do something with. And for whatever reason, we don't. Mary took the advantage of the opportunity, and she showed great devotion and great love. And we got to get in there that the part of this was gratitude. We've got to see the gratitude that she felt for Jesus raising her brother from the dead. Wow.
One commentary too that it talked about how, and I have a tendency too, I want to skip Palm Sunday and rush to Easter Sunday for Easter.
Right.
And so how we may do that sometimes, that where Mary here, she knew what's happening. She knew what he was sacrificing, what he was suffering, was going through. Somehow she understood it and got it. And so, she worshiped him and showed devotion to him beforehand. And I think it said also this was the perfume was like what they would do for a king.
Yes.
And she was honoring him like a king.
And that's a good point. One of the things I read, what were the gifts that were brought to him as a child?
The frankincense.
Frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Prophets, priests, and kings were anointed. We only have one example of a prophet being anointed, and that's Elisha, that I know of. But prophets, priests, and kings were anointed. There was incense given for the priest, gold given for the king, and myrrh for the one about to die. And here, he is anointed for his death. That's all I've got to say. Any other comments, observations?
Greg, I thought it was interesting in John 11:16. You know, you get these verses, you just seem like they're just a add-on somewhere in the story.
Yeah.
You know, it says, let us also go that we may die with him.
Yeah.
And what do you think you're talking about there? Are they actually talking about, you know, they didn't want to go back to Bethany because they thought they would be killed. Now, I don't know whether it's talking about that or whether it's all die with Lazarus.
Yeah, I think Thomas understood that, because he says in here, when we were there before, they were trying to kill you. So he's kind of got a pessimistic outlook. We're going to die, but I'm going with you. I'm going with you. That's a good observation, Chris. Thank you. And maybe at some level, at least some understood, but I don't think they got the whole concept of what it meant when he said, we're going to Jerusalem and I am going to be crucified. What do you suppose emotionally that was like for Jesus? What do you suppose it was emotionally like for the disciples to hear that? We know at least on one occasion that Peter said, no, you're not. And then Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Got to play with that. Got to play with that a little bit. Okay, I've said enough.
Again, I mean, it talks about too how she's going to be remembered, and and sometimes like we just read over the sacrifice part of it, since it's a year's wages, but not that we want to. I guess talk about remembrance as far as what we give and what we sacrifice. You know, we be remembered at some point. Not that that's glory for us, but necessarily, but you know, we struggle sometimes giving a tenth or less, and as opposed to like a year's wages.
Yeah.
So.
Barclay in his commentary, and I wished I'd brought it, but he points out that sometimes we get into this routine. How can we give as little as we can respectfully? And that's not a good place to be, probably.